If you look at my life from the outside, you will see a list of successes. I am 65 years old. I own the most popular bakery in town, Melayne's Sweets. I have 3 beautiful children and 5 grandchildren. I have a nice house with a garden full of roses. When people ask me, Melayne, what is your greatest achievement? They expect me to talk about my business. They expect me to talk about the wedding cake I baked for the mayor's daughter. But they are wrong. My greatest achievement is not my bakery. It is not my house. My greatest achievement is something that most 6-year-olds can do. For 50 years, I held a terrible secret. It was a heavy stone in my pocket. I built a life, raised a family, and ran a business, all while hiding this secret. I could not read. I was a master of disguise. I was a master of tricks. When I went to a restaurant, I never looked at the menu. I would wait for my friend to order, and then I would say, "Oh, that sounds delicious. I'll have the same." When I received a letter in the mail, I would leave it on the kitchen table. When my husband came home, I would say, "Honey, my eyes are so tired from decorating cakes today. Can you read this to me?" When I had to sign a document at the bank, I would say, "I forgot my reading glasses in the car. Just show me where to sign." I lived in a world of pictures and memory. I memorized the shape of the flour bag. I memorized the color of the sugar box. I navigated the world by guessing. But inside, I was terrified. I was terrified that one day, someone would hand me a piece of paper and say, "Read this, Melayne," and the whole world would know that the successful businesswoman was a fraud. I thought I could hide forever. I thought I could take my secret to the grave, but then my grandson, Leo, turned 6 years old. And he asked me a question that changed everything. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon. Leo was sitting on my rug holding a colorful book. It was a book about a dragon and a knight. "Grandma," he said, holding the book up to me. His eyes were big and hopeful. "Can you read me a story? Mommy says you make the best voices." I froze. My heart started to race. The familiar panic rose in my throat. "Oh, Leo," I said, using my old lie. "Grandma's glasses are upstairs, and my eyes are hurting a bit." Leo looked at me. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. He lowered the book. "It's okay, Grandma," he whispered. "Mommy said you wouldn't do it. She said you never read." He stood up and walked away, dragging the book on the floor. That sentence hit me like a slap in the face. She said you never read. I sat in my expensive chair in my beautiful house, and I felt smaller than an ant. I was letting my fears steal memories from my grandson. I looked at the rain hitting the window. "No more," I whispered. I stood up. I didn't go to the kitchen to bake. I went to the closet, put on my coat, and walked out the door. I was going to do the scariest thing of my life. I walked through the rain. My destination was a building I had avoided for 40 years, the public library. To most people, a library is a quiet, peaceful place. To me, it was a haunted house. It was full of millions of words that I couldn't understand. I stood outside the glass doors. I saw a small flyer taped to the window. I had memorized the shape of these specific words because I had seen them on TV. Adult literacy program. Free. My hands were shaking. I looked around the street. Did anyone see me? Did Mrs. Higgins from the flower shop see Melayne entering the school for people who can't read? I pulled my coat collar up to hide my face. I pushed the door open. The smell of old paper and dust hit me. I walked to the information desk. A young woman was sitting there. She looked like a college student. She had bright blue glasses and a kind smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. My throat was dry. I wanted to run away. I wanted to go back to my bakery where I was the boss, where I was safe. I stammered. "I am here for the class." The girl lowered her voice. She didn't shout. She didn't look shocked. She just smiled warmer. "Of course," she said. "My name is Sarah. I am the tutor. Please come with me to the back room. It's private." We sat at a small round table. Sarah put a piece of paper in front of me. "Okay," Sarah said gently. "We need to assess your level. Can you write your name? I picked up the pencil. It felt heavy and awkward like a stone. I can write Melayne, I said. I memorized the shape. I drew the letters. Melayne. Nia. Good, Sarah said. Can you write your address? I stared at the paper. I knew where I lived, 42 Oak Street. But I didn't know which letters made the sound oak. I didn't know if street started with an S or a C. I felt the tears coming. I was 65 years old. I paid taxes. I employed 10 people. And I couldn't write my own address. I can't, I whispered. I can't do it. I dropped the pencil. I'm sorry. This is stupid. I am too old. I started to stand up. Sarah reached out and touched my hand. Melayne, she said firmly, you are not stupid. You are brave. Do you know how many people are too scared to walk through that door? You are here. She opened a book. It wasn't a novel. It was a children's workbook. It had big letters and pictures of apples and balls. We start at the beginning, Sarah said. A is for apple. A, I repeated. For the next hour, I felt like a toddler. We practiced the sounds. Ah, ba, ka. My brain hurt. The letters seemed to dance on the page, but when the hour was over, I had learned 5 words. Cat, hat, mat, sat, bat. I walked out of the library. The rain had stopped. I looked at a street sign. Usually it was just a blue metal rectangle. But today I saw the letter AA, I whispered. A is for apple. I went home. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and excitement. I had a secret workbook in my bag. I had to hide it. My husband Thomas was a good man, but I was too ashamed to tell him. He thought I was perfect. I didn't want him to know his wife was slow. I hid the workbook under the mattress on my side of the bed. For 3 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the bakery queen. I frosted cakes. I managed the staff. Twice a week, I told Thomas I was going to yoga class. I went to the library. I struggled. Oh, how I struggled. English is a tricky language. Why do rough and dough look the same but sound different? It made me angry. One evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table. Thomas was watching the news in the living room. I had my workbook hidden inside a cooking magazine. I was trying to read a sentence. The dog ran to the park, Melayne? I jumped. Thomas was standing in the kitchen doorway. What are you doing? He asked. Just looking for a new recipe. I lied quickly, closing the magazine. You've been acting strange lately, Thomas said. He walked closer. You disappear on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You are always tired. Is everything okay? He looked at the magazine. The edge of the colorful children's workbook was sticking out. What is that? He asked. He reached for the magazine. Thomas? No, I shouted, but it was too late. He pulled the workbook out. On the cover, it said, Level 1, Reading for Beginners. He looked at the book. He looked at me. The silence in the kitchen was heavier than any silence I had ever known. Melayne, he said softly, is this yours? I covered my face with my hands. The secret was out. My 50-year masquerade was over. I couldn't look at him. I stared at the floor, waiting for the words I feared most. I waited for him to say, You are stupid. I waited for him to say, You lied to me for 40 years. I can't read, I sobbed. The truth poured out of me like water from a broken dam. I never learned. I was too ashamed. I'm sorry, Thomas. I'm so sorry. I felt his hand on my shoulder. It was warm and heavy. Melayne, he said. His voice was thick with emotion. Look at me. I looked up. He wasn't angry. He was crying. Why are you sorry? He asked gently. You built this house. You built a business. You raised our children. You did all that in the dark? Without reading? He shook his head in disbelief. My God, you are the smartest woman I know. He pulled the chair out and sat next to me. He opened the workbook to page 20. Okay, he said, wiping his eyes. What does this say? The cat is on the mat, I read slowly. Excellent, Thomas said. He kissed my hand. Let's do the next page. From that night on, my secret was no longer a burden. It was a project we shared. Thomas became my second teacher. Every evening after dinner, instead of watching TV, we sat at the kitchen table. He made flashcards. He labeled things in the house. The fridge had a sticky note that said fridge. The door had a note that said door. My life became a world of words. I started to see them everywhere. At the grocery store, I didn't just look at the pictures on the cans. I read tomato soup. I read organic. It was like putting on glasses for the first time. The world was coming into focus. But I had a goal, a deadline. Leo's 7th birthday was in 2 months. I went to the bookstore by myself. I walked to the children's section. I found the book, The Knight and the Dragon. I bought it. I took it home. I read that book 100 times. I read it until the pages were soft. I read it until I dreamt about knights and dragons. The dragon roared. Loud, I practiced in the shower. The knight raised. His shield I practiced while icing cakes. Some words were hard. Shield was a nightmare. Sword was tricky because the W is silent. But I didn't give up. The day of the party arrived. The house was full of balloons and screaming children. My daughter Sarah was cutting the cake. I sat in the big armchair in the living room. My heart was hammering against my ribs, just like the day I walked into the library. "Leo!" I called out. So my grandson ran over, his face covered in chocolate frosting. "Hi, Grandma. I have a present for you," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out The Knight and the Dragon. Leo looked at it. He looked a little confused. "But Grandma, Mommy said you don't like books. She said your eyes hurt." The room went quiet. The adults stopped talking. My daughter looked over, worried. Thomas stood in the doorway, giving me a thumbs up. "My eyes are better now," I said, my voice shaking just a little. "Sit down, Leo. I want to read you a story." Leo sat on the rug. The other children gathered around. I opened the book. For a second, panic hit me. The letters looked like black ants crawling on the paper. What if I forget? What if I stumble? I took a deep breath. I looked at Thomas. I looked at the word on the first page. I knew this word. Once, I began. Once, upon, a time. My voice was quiet at first, but the words were there. They weren't guesses. They weren't memories. They were real. There lived a brave knight. I looked at the picture of the knight. I looked at the word Knight. The silent K didn't trick me this time. I continued reading. He had a shiny sword and a big shield. The room was completely silent. The only sound was my voice and the ticking clock. I looked up for a split second. My daughter, Sarah, was standing by the cake table. She had her hand over her mouth. She was crying. She knew. In that moment, she realized why I never read menus, why I never read birthday cards, why I always forgot my glasses. She realized I had learned just for this moment. I kept going. I stumbled a few times. I pronounced mountain wrong. I had to stop and sound out dangerous. Dangerous. But I didn't stop. The dragon flew away. The end. I closed the book. My hands were sweating. I felt like I had just run a marathon. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then, Leo jumped up. "That was awesome, Grandma," he shouted. "Do the voices again." "Read it again." The room exploded with applause. My husband, Thomas, was clapping the loudest, beaming with pride. Sarah walked over to me. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. "Mom," she whispered into my ear, "I am so proud of you. I had no idea." "I know," I whispered back. I'm sorry I missed all your bedtime stories, Sarah. You're not missing Leo's. She smiled through her tears. That night, after the party was over and the guests had left, I sat in my quiet living room. The house was messy with wrapping paper and cake crumbs. I picked up the local newspaper from the coffee table. Usually, I would use it to clean windows or light the fire. I opened it to the front page. Local Meyer announces new park opening. I read the headline, then I read the first paragraph, then the second. I didn't understand every word. Infrastructure was still a mystery, but I understood the story. I wasn't looking at black squiggles anymore. I was looking at information. I was looking at freedom. I walked to my bookshelf. It was full of books I had bought for decoration books, with pretty spines that I never intended to open. I pulled down a cookbook. I pulled down a romance novel. I pulled down a history book. They weren't just objects anymore. They were doors. And for the first time in 65 years, I had the key. My name is Melayne. I have built a successful business. I have raised a family. I have made a lot of money. But if you ask me what my greatest achievement is, I won't tell you about my bakery. My greatest achievement is that yesterday, I read a story to my grandson. My greatest achievement is that I stopped being afraid of being a beginner. My greatest achievement is realizing that it is never, ever too late to change your life. I am 65 years old. My life is not ending. It is just beginning. Chapter 1 starts now. If this story about courage, lifelong learning, and the power of love inspired you, please give this video a like. Is there something you have always wanted to learn but were afraid to try? Share your goals in the comments below. For more emotional English stories about overcoming obstacles, please be sure to follow our channel.